Hello and welcome to Spyhards podcast, where your hosts go deep undercover into the world of spy movies to decipher which films make the knock list. But remember, this information is strictly for your ears only. I'm Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam the Provocateur, still trying desperately to come up with a clever and witty opening line for this film.
You might be here a while, folks.
I did write down, this is Cam the Provocateur, dodging mortar fire in a Land Rover. So I guess I have that.
I mean, that's also like, isn't that the plot of like No Time to Die?
Yeah, it doesn't feel specific enough. So
No.
I was like, well, that's why I kind of had a question mark next to it. And so my first intro was the honest one.
I mean, you could say, and I'm Cam the Provocateur messing around in the dark with Gerard Butler.
Oh, I didn't even go down that road. But I'd like to.
Oh! Oh, it's Spyhards, folks. You're glad you've tuned in, I'm sure. And before we get to the film we're already starting to take shots at, that we'll get back to that, we do need to induct a new Spyhards diehard.
Yes, we do indeed. And of course, if you would like to become a Spyhards diehard, leave a 5-star review for us on Apple Podcasts and tell the world in your review what you enjoy about Spyhards. We would love to know ourselves because, hey, we always appreciate the feedback. So if you do that, then we give you a top secret Spyhards diehards codename.
Absolutely, Cam. And this one comes from Sir Hilary Bray Baronet from Apple Podcasts in Great Britain. I hope his gold presents are looking polished.
Well, Scott, this means that the following, words that you say when you are reading out this review have to be dubbed. So, I don't know.
Oh, I see. Do you want to do a British accent and pretend to do me?
Given my Scottish accent, probably a bad idea.
I can definitely affirm it is a bad idea. But speaking of good ideas, here is the review. A must-listen 5 stars. Superb podcast in which the two hosts discuss all aspects of the spy movie genre, the famous, the obscure, and the occasionally tangentially related example. Coupled with intelligent and far-reaching interviews with astonishingly top-draw guests, this is a fascinating listen for anyone even remotely interested in the history of spy movies.
Wow, well, thank you very much. And you're right. A lot of the guests we bring on are very prestigious, and we are incredibly thankful to their time for joining us to give insight into spy movies. But I agree, Scott and I can take a certain amount of credit for the, what you perceive as the success of this podcast, but a lot of time we get outside help, and it really helps boost us up.
No, you're quite right there, Sir Hilary Bray. I'm constantly surprised by the people that say yes to us, and constantly surprised by the people that take the time to write lovely words like you just did. So thank you for your 5-star review. Thank you for becoming a Spyhards diehard. But Cam, we have to give Sir Hilary his secret code name.
Sir Hilary has a certain eloquence to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we got to get right to the point. This is
Okay.
Spyhards. That's punchy.
Mm.
And so, given the movie we're going to be talking about, a one-word title, again, punchy. And so, I'm going to go for the code name Reaper.
As in the pepper?
As in the weapon that is used at the end of this film.
Oh, I see. Yes. Agent Reaper has a certain energy to it, quite scary sounding.
Right?
Which is a complete juxtaposition from Sir Hilary Bray.
Well, that's the fun of it. Hilary Bray, no one assumes. They're like, oh, he's just a delightful, sophisticated gentleman. But
Hilly.
But in secret, he's Reaper.
Jack Reaper?
Agent Reaper.
Agent Reaper. Well, Sir Hilary Reaper, thank you for your 5-star review. Make sure you go forth boldly into your new life as Reaper.
That's right. Jack Reaper.
Jack Reaper. But speaking of boldly, Cam.
Or is it Jack the Reaper?
I don't want Jack the Reaper because that comes with a certain amount of baggage, and I really hope that Hilary Bray is not that way.
Yeah, we're going Jack Reacher. That's more fun.
Yeah, force of good in the world.
Exactly.
That's what we're hoping for. Exactly.
Yeah, and very tall.
But without further ado, folks, let's get to the review. Okay, Cam, night vision goggles on. What are we talking about this week?
Yes, we are talking about 2023's Kandahar, or as it's known in Canada, Mission Kandahar. Starring Gerard Butler.
Mission Kandahar. I think I prefer the one word.
I was really confused because on my Amazon, it popped up as Mission Kandahar. And then I had to do research like, wait, is it known as Mission Kandahar like in a lot of different places? Seems to be primarily a Canadian thing.
I wonder if there's like a Canadian film called Kandahar.
Maybe it was like CAN-Dahar, and it was some sort of Canadian comment on something.
Oh, perhaps. I mean, I kept writing this down as either Kandahar,
Yeah.
or I once wrote it as, in the style of Condor Man,
Kandahar.
Kandahar.
Oh, that's good. I
Is
didn't even
probably
connect
putting
that
more
one.
spin on the film than it needs.
That's far more playful than anything in the movie.
Yeah, I'm probably being too jovial about a serious subject already.
I was going to say, Scott, this is incredibly insensitive of you.
Oh, I'm sorry. We can't have fun on this podcast. It
No.
has to be a deep dive into the filmmaking aspects of cinema.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, no fun here, folks. For those who haven't Kandahar before and wish to Kandahar, here is your synopsis. Kandahar. The only thing more dangerous than the mission is the escape. After his mission is exposed, an undercover CIA operative stuck deep in hostile territory in Afghanistan must fight his way out alongside his Afghan translator to an extraction point in Kandahar, all whilst avoiding elite enemy forces and foreign spies tasked with hunting them down.
Yep.
That's the story.
Yeah. I mean, this is like, it's a very meat and potatoes sort of action film in many ways. And that synopsis pretty much sums up, exactly what it's selling.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, I want to get into the sort of thoughts and feelings on this film because I do actually have quite a lot to say on it. But
Yeah.
I'm quite curious as to how we got here because I always find it funny with Gerard Butler, and I keep calling him Gerald Butler. And in my notes, I wrote Gerald Butler several times, and so
Okay.
I have this like idea of Gerald Butler being this really old white dude.
Sure. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Gerald Butler.
Yeah. I was going to ask, though, just before we get to the behind the scenes, did you have any experience with this movie? Like, do you remember when it opened?
I have zero recollection of Kandahar. Like in the UK, it's an Amazon Prime Video release. So did it just go straight to Prime Video? Like where is it in North America?
It did open in theaters here, and I remember going to see a movie. I don't remember what it was in my timeline of seeing movies, but it was something that was like maybe even Plane. It could have been the Gerard Butler movie Plane. It could have been something else. It was definitely like a B kind of action movie that I went to and saw a trailer for Kandahar, and I was like, ooh, I don't think it was Plane, because I think I thought to myself, oh, I enjoyed Plane. Maybe I'd like to see this. And it kind of came and went very quietly, and it just did not seem, just from the blurbs I read from the reviews, that it was kind of offering what I appreciate in the superior Gerard Butler oeuvre.
Oh, wow, you're really putting some Gerald Butler work on the high shelf there.
I think we'll have a talk about Gerard Butler as we go forward, yeah.
I'm going to keep calling him Gerald, aren't I? I just can't get away.
Now I'm going to start doing it. I think I just did it because of you.
Are we officially just petitioning that Gerard Butler changes his name to Gerald Butler?
No, Gerard Butler is doing just fine as it is, and I appreciate him.
Okay. We're pro Gerard Butler on this podcast, apparently. And I was just looking at the box office. It made $5 million in the US and Canada, and worldwide made $9 million.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it actually got a release over here necessarily. Maybe if it did, it was a very limited one. If it was.
Right. Yeah.
But no experience with it. But I am keen to know because I find his career very fascinating because there's a man who liked 300 and stuff like that, like big films.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then it just seems to be like he's just devolved into geezer teasers over the years.
I guess, but I would say he's also found his footing. Like, he has found a market that he kind of owns. Like, there's this like kind of corner of filmdom where people know what they're getting. Mm-hmm. He often is working with pretty reliable journeyman directors, and a lot of these movies are fun. I mentioned Plane, but I thought Den of Thieves was a lot of fun. It's kind of like the lunk-headed version of Heat.
Right.
And it's a blast, and they're making a sequel to it. It's like he cranks out these movies kind of on the regular, and some hit, some don't. But there's definitely a fan base around him, and I can't think of anyone else who's quite doing what he's doing.
I think back to films like Rock and Roller and Law Abiding Citizen, and just think like there was a trajectory at some point that I just feel like it hasn't gone any further. I as you said, I'm sure Gerard Butler is absolutely fine. He doesn't give an F what I think about him. But I just find it interesting that I don't see him do as many dramatic roles. It seems to be a lot of action-focused films, which it might just be in the pocket for him. That's absolutely fine. But I just find that interesting.
Yeah, it feels like he was kind of trying to get someplace when he was doing things like The Bounty Hunter with Jennifer Aniston.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I want to be doing these kind of A-list films where I am like a leading man. And I just don't think it was quite working.
Sure.
And he was in a couple bombs. And a lot of actors are just kind of relegated to straight-to-video films at a certain point when they don't click, especially as they get older, because he's not a young guy. And yet he seems to have found this kind of place where he could just kind of have freedom to make these types of movies on a certain budget, and they will play to an audience a lot of the time. Kandahar, as you said, was not necessarily a huge smash in contrast to some of the other ones, but some of the other ones have actually done quite well, like Olympus Has Fallen.
Sure, and the sequels.
Yeah, the trilogy has done quite well. We'll probably see a fourth one at some point. And then, like, he'll do something like How to Train Your Dragon, where he does a voice role, and he's so incredibly good in that movie. And I know they're doing a live action film adaptation of How to Train Your Dragon because that's the craze these days. And I think, I may be wrong, but I think he's coming back to play that role in live action.
Fair enough to him. I'm sure, he's an in-demand actor. He's still working. I'm not saying anything disparaging to him or about him. It's more just I found his trajectory interesting because there was a time where I was like anticipating Gerard Butler films.
Yeah. Well, it seemed like he was going to be a big star. Yeah.
Yeah. But let's maybe dig into that a little bit deeper. How did we get to Kandahar?
Okay, so it all starts with the writer and associate producer of this film, Mitchell LaFortune.
Great name.
This is his first credit. And so if you go to his IMDb, you're like, well, wait, how does this guy go from seeming, nowhere to writing Kandahar for Gerard Butler and having like sole credit on it? So what happened was he was a former Army sergeant and intelligence analyst. He was like Jack Ryan, if you will. And in his time in intelligence, he developed counterinsurgency strategy for Afghanistan and Pakistan for the U.S. And in 2016, he sold a spec script he wrote called Burn Run to Thunder Road Pictures, one of the production companies that worked on this film. And he based it on true events from his time working in intelligence for the Defense Intelligence Agency, who at the time was deployed in Western Afghanistan during the 2013 Edward Snowden leaks.
Yeah.
So, like, that is kind of a mouthful to get out in terms of this guy's background, but just from that, you get the sense that, like, he was bringing a real seriousness and wanted people to understand kind of the inside workings of intelligence and the desperation that would come when assets in the field are compromised.
Well, there's a real specificity in this film, and that's actually one of the things I've got written down as a like. It does feel like there is a story here, and one that deserves to be dug into a little bit. Whether it's successful, we'll get to. But yeah, there is definitely some meat on this.
Definitely, and it was pitched as Sicario meets Jason Bourne, which I thought of the Jason Bourne stuff numerous times through this movie, with a supporting character we'll talk about further. But the Sicario stuff, when I read that after the fact, after watching the movie, I was like, oh, I get what they were going for.
Yeah.
Now this makes more sense.
Yeah, and I was also reading online that this was compared to another film that apparently did it more successfully that I haven't seen.
Okay, and what's the film?
The Covenant was the name of the film, Guy Ritchie film.
Oh, yeah, and we talked about that recently when we talked about Guy Ritchie's, what is it called? The one with the long title?
The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare.
That's right. Yeah, and we mentioned that one, and neither of us had seen it. It got like a somewhat weak release, and so, yeah, I'll catch up with it at some point, I'm sure, in my future, but I haven't yet.
No, okay.
And so then that spec script sold in 2016, as I said. And it kicked around for a while. It wasn't until 2020 that it was announced that it was going to be directed by Rick Roman Waugh, who is an LA-born director and producer who started out actually as a stuntman. And he worked on movies like The Crow, True Romance, Universal Soldier, Days of Thunder, Lethal Weapon 2, They Live, the classic John Carpenter film.
Great film.
And he moved on from stunts after 2001's The One with Jason Statham and Jet Li, which I don't know if you remember that film. It was very 2001.
Yep. It's I remember very much enjoying it in 2001, but I was exactly the right age to enjoy that film.
Same here. And I remember there was a part where there was like a rat that had a bomb inside of it. and I think it was the Jet Li character detonated it, and the rat looked at the camera, and what came out of its mouth was the opening to the Down with the Sickness song by Disturbed. The oh wahaha came out of its mouth.
The rat did oh wahaha.
It did, and then it exploded.
I mean, you say it's very 2001. I guess that is very specifically 2001 because of the song. I don't know how they managed to get away with the rat doing the ooh-ah-ah-ah.
I would have to go back and watch the tape, and I don't plan on doing that.
I am actually tempted to put on this film after we finish doing this just to hear the ooh-ah-ah-ah. Does the rest of the song play during the sequence?
I believe it does, yeah.
Because by itself, that sound effect is very odd.
It is incredibly odd. But yeah, I believe that kicks off the Down with the Sickness song.
Do you hear like the other people in the scene going, oh, and they're fighting? Is it timed, the punches? Oh.
They just keep all of the characters actually like reciting the lyrics as it goes. Yeah.
It just turns into a music video by the end, and they're all just saying the lyrics, yeah.
I mean, this movie has been redeemed if that's the case.
Oh, yeah, I'm all for it. I mean, the opening of Triple X has Rammstein in it, so I guess we're sort of used to that.
Yeah, I mean, it was, it was the style at the time.
I knew you were going to say that. It's like your favorite saying.
It's Grandpa Simpson. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I call you.
It's true. And so Rick Roman Waugh is also the brother of Scott Waugh, who's a director himself, and you may have heard of his films, his notable films. He's done Act of Valor, Need for Speed, and the fourth Expendables film.
The latter two I've heard of. I've seen Need for Speed.
I haven't seen Act of Valor, but I know it was quite popular. I saw the other two.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's a war film?
It is, yes. And it's interesting that both brothers are making kind of these kind of like action films that aspire to be a little bit more.
Sure. I don't think Need for Speed aspires to be much more.
I think Act of Valor does. I don't think Expendables 4 did. I saw it in theaters. The
hint was in the title.
That's right. And it was called Expendables.
I hate it when they put numbers in titles, but...
Yeah. So Rick Roman Waugh, he starts out directing a little bit in the mid-90s, but his career really doesn't kick off until late in the 2000s. He does a movie in 2008 with Stephen Dorff and Val Kilmer called Felon. It's a prison drama, and it was a pretty small release. I don't think many have seen it, but it does seem to have kind of gotten a bit of traction and probably helped him get the movie that I know better, which is the 2013 film Snitch with Dwayne Johnson.
Snitch? Is that the one where he's like a dating expert?
No, you're thinking of Hitch.
I'm thinking of Hitch.
With Will Smith.
Yeah. Just rhymes. Okay. Snitch. Hang on.
No, it was more of a crime drama
I've seen it.
where his son, like the Rock's character's son, was in trouble, and he had to journey into the criminal underworld to help him.
I have seen it.
And it looked like a real, just B-movie action film, but it was actually a lot smarter than that and better than that.
Did he also help people learn to date better during the film at the same time? Or?
He might have. It's been a while. It's been over 10 years since I saw it. I did see it in theaters, but it was the movie that actually introduced to me John Bernthal.
Oh,
and I remember he was electric in that movie, and I'm like, who is this guy? Little did I realize the next 10 years I'd be seeing him pop up over and over again.
But I imagine that's probably around the time he bagged Walking Dead and all that sort of stuff, and his ticket went up as it, his star rose.
Definitely, yeah. This is pre-Punisher and a lot of other things. Yeah. And I didn't watch Walking Dead, so some people would have obviously known him from that. But I remember seeing Snitch and just being like, this guy's incredible. Like, this is kind of a, it does what it says on the tin kind of movie, but it's really elevated by his performance in particular.
He's actually really good in the FX show The Bear, which I know you haven't watched because you don't watch television. But a lot of people listening have watched, and he's actually one of the best parts of that whole show. He's not main cast, but when he turns up, you feel his presence.
Right, and I do watch television, Scott, but I'm just catching up on the '60s still. So I've got to get through the '70s, '80s, '90s, 2000s. You know how it is.
I know. You're watching I Love Lucy reruns at this point, right?
I can only aspire to get to the point where I'm watching the Nanny reruns with Fran Drescher.
Sure.
Mm.
I mean, you've got some great years coming in the sort of 80s, though. Dallas, all that sort of stuff. You're going to be blown away.
I hear this show Cheers might be kind of good.
I mean, everyone knows your name there.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, I can only look forward to that.
I'm more of a tossed salad and scrambled eggs kind of guy, if you know what I mean.
I don't know what you mean.
No, actually, you really don't, do you?
No.
I just won't explain it. I think it's actually funnier.
Yeah. So, Rick Romanois also directed a documentary about military PTSD called That Which I Love Destroys Me. And following that, he gets into the Gerard Butler game. He directs the third Has Fallen film, Angel Has Fallen, with Gerard Butler and Nick Nolte, which at this point is the trilogy closer. We will see if that remains the case.
I mean, Angel has. I don't think I've seen this one. Is he like ascending to heaven and he's fighting for God or something? Is it going sci-fi?
Okay. I've got to rack my brain. So the first one was the White House. The second one is London. I think Angel Has Fallen involved Air Force One, perhaps.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I was going down the funny route, but yeah, we could just actually say the plot, sure.
Yeah, and I think Morgan Freeman was the president in that one.
Right. I mean, he is an angel.
Sorry, like, I know you're joking around, but like, I literally was like drawing a blank as to what happened in that movie, and I saw it in theaters. So I'm like, wait, what was that one about?
You wouldn't be able to move past it until you figured it out. You have that sort of like disrupt in your brain.
It's true. It's true. So it was not one I particularly cared for. I got to be honest.
Okay. It lost its wings.
It did. It fell to earth.
Oh yeah. Disgraced. Like us.
But Angel Has Fallen may not have wowed me, but the duo reteamed and did 2020's Greenland, which was a bit of a sleeper hit. It was a disaster film. I have not seen Greenland, but I know a lot of people really enjoyed it.
I have no indication as to what it is apart from being a disaster film, but it's actually not one I've ever come across either, so I don't really have anything to add. I'm just assuming it's I don't know, about the country of Greenland.
I don't think so. I don't know. Or do they have to get to Greenland? I'm not sure.
Our guesses are as good as anyone's right now because we have no indication as to what this film is.
You know what? Contact us on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, and let us know if we should be watching Greenland, because I'm not against it.
No, I like lands of any color, really.
Yeah, exactly. Scott doesn't discriminate.
I don't. I'm from England.
That's true. Yes. And I got nothing. Anyways, for Canada, I'm like, I don't know.
You got Newfoundland? Land?
Our home and native land.
Oh. There you go. There you
go. So this movie was the follow-up for Rick Romanois to 2021's football drama National Champions, starring J.K. Simmons. I have never heard of this movie, and I wonder if it got a little bit lost in the COVID shuffle.
This entire like pre-section, the briefing section is all like, I haven't seen that film, and I haven't seen this film.
I've seen some of these films, but there are a number that have slipped across my radar, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, there were a lot of films that like just had these unceremonial dumpings in 2020 and 2021 and then got lost to time, which I feel bad for the artists involved of those.
Yeah, because my suspicion is that National Champions would have been a theatrical feature that would have gotten a little bit of attention, at least.
Yeah.
And I think in that time period, it's like so many things just got dumped on streaming unceremoniously.
Yeah. I mean, even like big tentpole films like, you know, Black Widow and Mulan were just shoved into Disney Plus.
Yeah, totally. So, maybe National Champions is worth checking out. Let us know on X, folks, if we should be checking out National Champions and Greenland.
This is perfect opportunity to get people back in cinemas. It's a bit late now, but say in 2021, if they'd gone like, let's re-release all these films, but charge like $5 a ticket, right?
Yeah.
Make it super cheap because people will be like, I could watch Black Widow on Disney Plus, man. I'm not paying any money. Like, yeah, sure, but you didn't see it in the theaters. But if you take away the $20 fee just to come and sit in a seat, and you make it like $5, you're guaranteed going to fill up the theaters for at least a week for people who would like to have seen Black Widow on the big screen. I didn't get to, and I would have liked to.
Yeah, they actually did a re-release of Tenet fairly recently.
There you go. I saw Tenet in the big screen, to be fair. So
yeah, a lot of people in North America weren't going to theaters at that point.
No.
So yeah,
no, we had like seat distancing and everyone had to wear masks and stuff. But yeah, but I think that was a real missed opportunity. I'm not saying the film you mentioned is necessarily the candidate to put out there, but the two I said, and I'm sure there were some other ones I'm completely forgetting about that were tentpole films that were just shoved out on streaming instead. That really could have stood to have been re-released.
Not a tentpole, but I think the movie Palm Springs could have done well.
Is that the comedy film about it's basically Groundhog Day, but that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, that was a fun film. Yeah, I enjoyed that.
With Andy Samberg. It was a great movie and could have been, a fantastic date movie and crowd-pleasing comedy. So
yeah, for sure.
That would have been a good option. But so when it came to kind of the inspiration for this film, Rick Romanois mentioned Sicario.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he wanted to delve into the human angle of this story. So we'll talk about whether he succeeded, but one thing I noticed was when it was announced that he was joining the film, that's when the title changed from Burn Run to Kandahar.
Okay. Kandahar is a bit more specific, I suppose.
Did they change it to that name just to kind of evoke Sicario?
I think it's more just Burn Run sounds like a driving film.
That's true. That's true. And his brother had directed Need for Speed, which did not perform well. So maybe they want to sound like anything other than a racing movie.
Yeah, I would put it down to that because that's exactly how I would react to, I'm going to go see Burn Run tonight. Well, I don't really like driving films. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then that would have been it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the thing with psychology, especially with names and things like that. It can be as simple as that.
Totally. And at the time it was announced that Rick Romanois would also co-write the film or would rewrite the screenplay, but that's not on the finished credits. So I don't know if anything happened there, but that was something they were saying up front.
Maybe there was like some small edits he made, but in arbitration, they're like, it's still mostly this other guy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And so this was the first U.S. film to shoot in Saudi Arabia's northwestern Alula region. And so they were working with local crews and extras. And this was at a point in time where Saudi Arabia was looking to grow its film industry. And it's still heading down that path. But this was one of the first U.S. productions to take part in that.
Yeah, well, there is a certain authenticity, I suppose, to doing that. Despite this isn't actually set in Saudi Arabia at all.
No, it's fronting it for obviously Afghanistan and Iran and what have you. Yeah. And it's like when they use Vancouver for like every city in the world.
Yeah, Vancouver's basically been everywhere apart from like Middle Eastern cities, basically.
Yeah, we're used for San Francisco all the time.
Well, you've got the bay and stuff. It makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And so this movie had a budget of, this is where it gets a little fuzzy. These numbers are not fully released. I found two numbers, 30 million and 70 million. Now, I found those numbers before I watched the movie. So in my mind, I'm like, probably 30. You kind of hedge your bets with like a Gerard Butler action film.
Yeah.
And then I watched the movie and I go, I think this might have cost 70 million. A lot of it seems quite expensive.
I think they spent some money on it. Yeah, one of the scenes in particular actually stands out. I think it must have been a bit of money spent on it.
Yeah, so 70 million, let's go with. There was an article in a newspaper about one of the actors where they cited 70 million as being the budget, so I'm just going to go with that. So 70, domestic, it made 4.8 million, international 4.6, for a total, as Scott said earlier, 9.4.
And that ain't 70.
That is bad. That's real bad.
That's kind of hard.
Oh yeah. That's Kandahar.
Yeah, I don't know which pun is worse.
They're both terrible.
You let us know, folks. They're both pretty bad. Yeah. So's the box office, to be fair. So we're all bedfellows on this one.
I remember the trailer was not inspiring when I saw it, and they opened it, I believe, the same weekend as The Little Mermaid remake.
What a tonal clash.
Right?
There's no like Barbenheimer with that one. What is it? Is it the little Kandahar? Is that what you call it?
I guess so.
Kandamaid?
I'm going to assume they were trying to do counter programming, but it opened, Memorial Day weekend opposite The Little Mermaid, and I just think this movie was invisible. Like, I remember it opened and went in like the blink of an eye.
I've got the title. It's Murderhar.
Oh, that's dark.
I know. That's why it would never work. But like, that's the best combination of mermaid and Kandahar.
Okay.
Where's that poster? Where's that like online campaign to get people to see Kandahar and Little Mermaid the same weekend? I do not know.
I think the difference was that people knew what Oppenheimer and Barbie were.
Yeah.
And in this case, people only knew what The Little Mermaid was.
Well, I mean, people had to sell. Well, marketing teams had to sell people on who Oppenheimer was in the trailer, and like doing that nuclear explosion and stuff. That trailer was fantastic.
I saw the trailer for Kandahar. No one knew what this movie was.
I'm eager to go back and rewatch it now. I think maybe that one would wonder if they spent much on the marketing, because again, this isn't one that ever came across my radar. The only reason I knew about it is because we were doing this show at the time.
Yeah.
So I knew there was a spy movie coming out, and I think we added it to our list. But other than that, I had no like firm connection to Kandahar.
Yeah. So it landed at number 185 at the worldwide box office for the year. It landed one spot below a French re-release of Pedro Almodovar's 2002 film Talk to Her.
Yep.
And one spot above a remake of House Party that I also barely knew existed.
Oh boy.
Those are dark times.
That's a real Gerard Butler there, isn't it? That's
Yeah.
Okay. Well, swing and a miss. Hey, but we're still talking about it.
The top 3 for the year. Number 1 was Barbie. Number 2 was Super Mario Brothers movie. And number 3 was Oppenheimer.
Speaking of synergistic marketing.
Yeah. And just my final note on this one is that Mitchell LaFortune is actually co-writing a sequel that will come out next year to Greenland called Greenland Migration for Gerard Butler and Rick Romanois.
It's got to be about the country then if it's called Migration, because don't loads of birds flock to Greenland?
Maybe during this kind of apocalyptic event, they are trying to get to Greenland.
Oh, like it's like Waterworld, and that's like the last island.
Maybe.
Okay, I'm down. I love Waterworld nowadays, so like, give me more.
Does Greenland have a spy connection? Should we be covering this on Agents in the Field?
Let's just do it anyway next week on Spyhards. We're talking about Greenland.
I mean, Gerard Butler might have a couple spy films. I mean, are we counting Tomorrow Never Dies?
Technically he's in it, so yeah, sure.
Yeah, he is in it.
Oh, yeah, he definitely is in it.
He's in it.
Yeah, he is. Well, okay. That's the setup. Here's the chit chat. What do we think of Kandahar? Do you mind if I go first?
Please.
Frustrating is the word I wrote at the top of my list.
Okay, yeah.
I like the concept of this. I like the idea of this guy trying to get out to get back to his family. I think that's a great way to like have a hook for the story. You've got the sort of ticking clock. He needs to get back for graduation, yada, yada, yada. And you've got this other hook about, the translator that was left behind by the withdrawal of forces and has been messed around. He's lost a son. He doesn't like what the Western governments have done to his country. They've pillaged it because it's basically what we did, and so that, great setup. There's a lot of drama you can mine from this, and a lot of great action sequences you could have with this. Not to say it doesn't, and we'll get to that, but it didn't, and so I was frustrated. I feel like ultimately there was still a lot left on the table, a lot left to mine from this story. And, there are good sequences we can talk about, some good performances we can talk about, but it just never really gets to the point where it's like, oh, this was a story, like, what they told it well. I feel like they left so much on the table, like I said. Frustrating.
This is a movie unlike, I think, any other we've tackled on the main feed for me, where I sat through this film last night and I was like admiring a lot of elements. And when we talk about likes, I'll have a lot of positive things to say. And it felt like a dirge to get through.
It was tough.
I felt so disconnected the entire 2 hours of this film. And I would sit there and be like from a, intellectual standpoint, like, oh, wow, that's really well done. Or, that action scene is, I mean, we talk so often about badly shot action in movies nowadays. And a lot of the stuff is highly accomplished. Like, it was very effective filmmaking.
Yep.
And yet I could never care about anything.
It's not a single character, really.
And that's the problem. It has that kind of technical proficiency you see in a lot of Gerard Butler films. And I say that not just behind the camera, but on camera as well. Like, when you have his characters going through things, like, you feel like you are kind of seeing the dots connected on screen with how things work.
Yep.
And that was the case in Plane as well. When they're trying to fix the plane, they're really explaining to the audience, how do we try to do this? Let's try to do this on screen. And I felt that a lot in Kandahar, where they would explain what they needed to do, and then I would watch them do that. It had a lot of process in it, and I appreciated that. But then the movie kept trying to convince me it was about people. And that's where I struggled. And they can draw all the comparisons they'd like to Sicario. And after watching the movie, I was suddenly like, oh, wait, that shot where they are driving in, I don't remember which town it was, but it has the bodies hanging from the crane.
Yep.
And they're like, this is, the new Afghanistan. A lot like the old Afghanistan. And I'm like, oh, that is suddenly so reminiscent of when they're driving into the cartel territory in Sicario. Like, it is really close. Like, it has a similar vibe to it for sure. But the thing about Sicario is, when you watch that film, people love the process stuff in that movie, but what really connects them to those two films is Benicio del Toro's character, and obviously you have Josh Brolin's CIA figure as well, who's very shady. There's a lot to mine from both those characters, plus Emily Blunt in the first one as well, which is kind of your POV character into that world. People remember those three actors in those movies. And in this film, it should theoretically be Gerard Butler, but I knew next to nothing about him other than the most basic of details. It's like, he has a daughter. She is going to graduate. He has a marriage that fell apart. That's about it.
He's basically Brian Mills.
He's a lot of Gerard Butler characters. Like, I'm sure that when Gerard Butler looked at the script, he's like, yeah, I can do this. And that's a problem, because it wants to convince me I care about the people. If you tell me this is an entirely, like, process-driven film, it's about just, like, people trying to escape and how they do it, and we're going to go through it beat by beat, how you pull that off. That could be really entertaining. When we talked about Zero Dark 30, there was a lot of criticisms of that movie because the lead character, the movie was more about the process as to how she got the job done versus what her personal life was like. That movie, I was invested every step of the way. Whereas this film, I felt like a wall was being thrown up constantly because it would want me to feel some sort of emotional connection to what was going on between our two leads. And I would just sit there with a blank stare on my face going like, boy, how far are we into the movie at this point?
Well, there's a moment at the end of the film where they think they've been, I say they, I mean Gerard Butler and his, I guess, co-star of this film, Navid Negahban, who plays Mo, the translator. We mentioned the translator earlier. And they're the two that are trying to get out of Kandahar. And there's a moment where you think it's too late. They've been surrounded by baddies, let's just call them that. And they kind of like say to each other, oh, well, it's been we tried and we gave it our all. And like they're both sort of crying and they're bloodied up. And I'm just stood there just staring at the screen. I don't know why I'm standing. Maybe I'm sat down.
I was going to say.
Just applauding.
He stands there with a stern expression on his face whenever he watches a movie for Spyhards.
Just like,
He likes to look down on the TV.
Yeah, I mean, I put it on the floor and just looked down at it. And, no wonder I've got neck problems, right?
Arms crossed, disapproving stare on his face. Yeah.
It's like, entertain me. Come on.
Unless it's Condor Man, which he's like dancing around the room,
I'm
frolicking in the
joint, flapping my
his
arms. Yeah.
Screaming out to his wife, Hannah, look at me, look at me.
It's like he's watching Condor Man again. Okay. He's got to see someone about that. Jeez.
This wasn't written into the marriage certificate.
Oh, God. For richer, for poorer, sickness and health, and Condor Man. I did not sign up for this. Oh,
Didn't
God.
realize I was marrying Michael Crawford as well.
Oh, God. At least Barbara Carrera's there. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Can't turn that one down.
Even Oliver Reed doesn't want to be here. I mean, come on.
Although that guy doesn't want to be anywhere.
Well, that's true. That's true. But no, I just like, I had no emotional reaction to it. And I've just spent 2 hours with these characters. And they're you're like, you're sci-fi characters. You're meant to put yourself in their shoes. You want to get out with them. You want to get away and get them both back to their families.
Mm-hmm.
I understand the plight. I understand the mission. I just don't think they sold me on it. And you mentioned Sicario. One film that jumped out to my notes, and you also mentioned Zero Dark 30, which comes up in my notes too. I'll start with that. Jessica Chastain does a fantastic job bringing you into the world and then making you understand why some of the choices in that film aren't correct and how it's emotionally affecting her.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you care about. The last shot of the film is basically a slow zoom into her basically breaking down after completing her mission.
Yeah.
And you feel that catharsis with her. you're like, oh my god, like you've just witnessed a 30-minute intense night vision assault on the compound, and you're just like, and breathe.
Yeah.
And that really hits you. The other film I wrote down was Argo.
Right. Yeah.
Which is, for those who haven't seen, Ben Affleck film where he helps some people from an embassy get out of, I can't remember the country. But like, again, it's trying to get out of a country, get on the plane last minute, that sort of thing, that sort of intense pressure of being in enemy territory and being chased. And, Ben Affleck and his co-stars do a great job of making you feel that pressure, the pressure cooker that you're in, and how close it gets to them being caught by the end. And you've also got like the stories of what's going on at home. And this has a sort of B story of, I don't think it was the CIA or something's headquarters watching through drones the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a very questionable choice. It's a very Deus Ex Machina that happens at the end. Feels like just a get out of jail free card.
It totally is. Yeah.
Yeah. I just sort of, whatever at this point. Just let me get out of this film. But, it didn't earn that moment. But Argo earns its moments. Zero Dark 30 earns that breath at the end. Sicario, again, earns those moments. And I just don't think this spends any time, despite being 2 hours long, getting you invested in these characters. And it's a real shame, because I actually do have a lot of time for Navid Negahban's character of Mo. I think he actually gives probably the most impactful performance in the film.
Yeah.
I actually was not affected by it, but I felt it on me. I felt him actually pulling me into the story because of how he had been treated and how he'd lost a son and he wanted to get back to his family. I understood that. I understood that motivation.
Also want to recover his wife's sister who had gone missing as well.
Yeah.
Which is kind of one of those subplots that is set up and then just kind of goes
away at the
nowhere.
end.
And you have Gerard Butler saying, "Don't worry, you and I, we're going to find her." And I'm like, is this a sequel setup?
Which is released at the end.
It's the reporter, right?
Oh, that was the reporter. Oh, you're right. This is not in it. Yeah, you're right. That was the reporter that was released. I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, like there's some fuzziness going on there. And the thing is, I was going to ask you, so we watched Zero Dark 30, Catherine Bigelow's film. That is a very complex film in terms of information it needs to convey, right?
Sure.
And it does a great job. I never feel lost when I watch Zero Dark 30.
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel a little lost in this movie at points when they are hopping locations like every 30 seconds and setting up different characters, different alliances and allegiances? And I'm just like, wait, hold on. You're not giving these characters any personality, so that when I cut to them, I go, I have to entirely remember them just based on appearance, because they haven't been given any character. And so I'm like, this is getting a little complicated because I'm constantly bouncing locations and then also having these kind of backdoor setups for different alliances happening.
Mm-hmm.
Certain characters are set up in one place, and then next thing you know, they're meeting with another character to, kind of change the game in terms of what they want to do in terms of the pursuit of Gerard Butler's character. And I'm like, okay, I'm getting a little lost here.
Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers.
Yeah.
They're at Helm's Deep, and they are surrounded by, I believe it's Uruk-hai, and they're losing.
Mm-hmm.
And then Gandalf the White comes over the hill and brings in the cavalry, and they win the day, right? Now, you've spent the Fellowship of the Ring learning who Gandalf is and learning about his sacrifice, and then you get that miraculous recovery, and you do kind of learn about that happening in the film. I understand that. But there, you go, yes, that's Gandalf, right? You pop for that.
Yeah.
There are moments when characters come back from the beginning of the film to save our characters later on in the film. I do recognize who they are, but half the time I don't know why that's an important motivation as to why they're coming back, or why that's a triumphant moment for the characters, apart from the fact that their bacon is being saved.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is no earning of it. And also going back to something we said before, which I want to go to likes in a minute, because I do have some things to say. And I said this to you off air, but I'm saying it on the episode. Some of the characters are just so nondescript.
Yeah.
And I understand that, the Middle Eastern, some of the Middle Eastern countries have become quite decentralized. There's a lot of fiefdoms and things like that, different areas being owned by different groups of people. And so they're trying to portray that. Like, you could just accidentally stumble into, I think they call it like ISIS-K or something in this film. It's like, I don't think that's actually a real one, but I think they just made that up for the film. I might be wrong. I don't know all the organizations. But, that's a real, threat. I understand that threat, but you don't do anything to differentiate who is who and make people stand out. So I don't know who is a good guy, who is a bad guy, and not in like the sort of fun spy movie way of like, don't trust anyone. It's more just, I don't know who these people are. So if I see someone coming towards me, I don't know if he's a goodie or a baddie. It means nothing. It's just a character walking towards Gerard Butler.
And on one hand, I kind of admire the movie for that, because going in, I'm like, this is a Gerard Butler action movie, and sometimes these movies can get a little problematic. You know, I remember in London Has Fallen, there was definitely some moments where you're like, this is real.
Oh, that line.
Yeah.
I'm not mentioning that line.
Line, where he just tells someone to go to Afghanistan, and you're like, okay.
Yeah.
These movies are clearly being aimed in a certain direction, like a certain audience is kind of what they're going after. And so I kind of expected a little bit of that in Kandahar. Not the case.
No.
It was incredibly sympathetic to almost all of the characters. You know, you have the head of the Iran security who's trying to track them down. And, you know, he is the one interrogating the reporter who has the information that could lead to Gerard Butler. And they set up his family life. And there's also, like, I thought the actor was honestly, like, quite good. He's played by Bahador Foladi. And, like, that character, he just has a certain, like, world weariness. And it's like, I have to do this job, but I carry it with me. Like, I feel the baggage of it.
Yeah.
And ultimately, he's killed, and you see his family mourning him at the end. Like, it cares about the humanity of almost everyone involved, which I respect, but at the same time, it respects them as human beings without giving them any dimension, which also prevents you from connecting to them.
Yeah. And also, I say there are just too many groups. I understand that might be the reality of traveling through that part of the world.
Yeah.
But, like, we'll go to familiar ground for those who haven't seen every spy movie under the sun. Let's talk about The Living Daylights for a second. Too many villains, right?
Yeah.
It's known as the Bond film with probably too many villains in it, and I'm not sure I could quite remember which one is Whitaker, and I can't remember the rest of the names, right? Like, there are too many villains, and it like Necros is in there and stuff like that. I understand, but even those have some like Whitaker at least has like the weird house full of guns and stuff. Necros throws milk bombs. I can remember that because they make them distinct, at least. This has a bunch of different villains, and they are nondescript and definitely not distinct from one another. And so I feel like that's one of those things that pushes you away from the film. And I think it's probably why we both experience this sort of out-of-body, like, third person watching ourselves watch the film. And, I mean, this has no right to be 2 hours, by the way. No right whatsoever.
Well, I had a question for you. Who is this movie for?
I think action film fans.
Is it?
Well, I'm not saying it actually like meets that barrier, like it steps up to the mark and does what it needs to do. But, you know, who is Sicario for?
I think Sicario appeals more to, like, prestige drama fans. Like, it has a certain pedigree.
Well, I could see this having aspirations of that. I could see
it having that aspiration, but it's also not coming from a studio known for making those types of movies, a filmmaker known for making those types of movies. You have a star.
People don't care about that. People going into cinemas don't care about. I mean, you care about that because you are, you know, the maestro of cinema. You know a lot. I don't care about that personally. I wouldn't care about the director's past work going into a film.
I would say the people that flock to prestige dramas are going to see the name Denis Villeneuve and go, I want to see that. And are going to look at this movie and go, no, I don't care.
I disagree. I actually disagree with you there. I think
Okay.
the general populace doesn't give a monkeys about that. Like, I know who Denis Villeneuve is. I'm not like so far away from the world I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm not judging a film. I'm not prejudging a film based on the people attached.
Okay, that's fair.
Like, for me, the selling point is a trailer. Like, if you can't buy me on a trailer, or at least a synopsis that I find interesting, then you're on shaky ground. But, like, it doesn't matter if it's like Dave Bautista as the lead star. And actually, nothing against Dave Bautista. Actually, I'm going to take that back. Dave Bautista's a good actor. Let's throw out Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, an actor I don't have a lot of time for personally.
Yeah.
Not personally, but professionally, perhaps. And him being the lead actor in the film means nothing to me. And him being teamed up with, let's put him with Christopher McQuarrie, wouldn't mean anything to me. But the trailer might.
Sure.
And you're telling me the trailer for this was trash?
Yeah, it was. Have you seen the trailer for The Big Red with Dwayne Johnson?
Is that the Christmas movie with J.K. Simmons?
Yeah.
No, I haven't seen it.
Holy smokes. Folks, I'm going to forecast that one now. Box office implosion.
Kandahar.
Looks awful. awful.
Okay.
But like to me, I go like I don't really know who this is for, because I think action fans who like Gerard Butler action films are going to be bored out of their minds.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of like contemplative, like talking scenes and lots of like drone shots of cars going in different directions.
A lot of kind of very messy political stuff it's trying to communicate.
Sure.
It's not giving you what you
Murky,
would
certainly.
very murky. It's not giving you what you would typically get from a Gerard Butler film. And then I also think prestige drama fans are going to walk out going like, well, this movie felt very superficial.
Yeah. I there's a difference between what this film is, who this film is for, and who this film is effective to.
Yeah,
Like, I'm pretty sure it was aimed at the people who would like to watch Sicario and Zero Dark 30,
probably.
but it's just not up to that standard.
Yeah.
But we have been lamping on it for 20 minutes. I do want to throw some praise the way of Kandahar. Can-do attitude. Cam, what's something you liked about it?
The filmmaking in this is honestly quite impressive.
Yeah.
Rick Waugh, I'm not like a huge fan of his. I haven't seen much of his work, obviously, but like when I was watching things like the nighttime assault from the helicopter,
Mhm.
it looked incredible and it had an authenticity to it. Like it wasn't playing it up as like flashy Hollywood stuff. It looked visually incredible, but it had a grittiness and like a real world, like just feel to it. When you're hearing the gunfire, when you are just seeing like the flashes from the barrel in the dark,
Mhm.
it felt like the kind of filmmaking where I go like, it's interesting that this guy's making these kind of, kind of B movies when he's someone who has the kind of skills that in the older eras, he would have been cranking out A-list star vehicles as sort of a journeyman.
Yeah.
Because he has that kind of ability. And I was honestly impressed throughout the film how good it looked.
Yeah.
You have, the Pakistani agent that is pursuing them throughout this movie. And there's so much of that. There's a lot of asset from Jason Bourne going on, but the way he shoots him on the motorcycle, there's all these incredible sequences of just this character ripping through the desert on this motorcycle. And I'm like, this looks beautiful. Like this movie is on a technical level really visually impressive. And when he's shooting process driven stuff, it looks great. It's just that like, it's all flash and no substance, but the flash, I gotta say, was very impressive, and it makes me think I should check out Greenland because it might look great.
Well, it goes back to something I've said a bunch of times in this show that I've aped off of Mark Commode, which is I don't care a lot of things, but the film has to make me feel something.
Yeah.
I don't feel a single thing in this film. But from an objective standpoint, yes, the filmmaking is quite excellent at times and beautiful. And it will lead me on to what I'll say is I think in terms of sequences, the night vision sequence where they're attacked by the helicopter,
Yeah.
I think it's far more realistic than how they did it in Zero Dark 30. Because I think they actually do use night vision technology in this. And it just is very well shot. And like the sort of action geography, like you can follow where the helicopter is. They're circling around to come back at him. You understand exactly what's going on. He's being attacked from different sides, and it's not close quarter stuff. There's a lot of wide shots of it. It's just quite impressive stuff. Like it's filmmaking with a large canvas. Like he feels like there's a bit of scope to this film.
Oh yeah, like it feels big. And when you get to the ending and they are trying to make that desperate dash to Kandahar to be safe.
To the airstrip.
Yeah, to the airstrip. And you have the Reaper, which is one of my favorite bits in the movie where they're like, what is our Reaper loaded with? Hellfire, sir. I was like, oh, good Lord. But you get all the explosions in the desert going off of, this huge like collection of vehicles. It looks like Fury Road basically with all these cars approaching.
It looks like 70 million is what it looks like.
Yeah, it does. And then suddenly everything explodes. And how many movies have we seen where it's like a CG explosion or an explosion that just doesn't look very good, like Inspector? This looked beautiful.
The biggest one in the world. Sure.
This looked beautiful. Like all these explosions going off in the desert, and you've got your lead characters turning and looking at it. It felt like a real you are there moment.
Yeah, I from a technical standpoint, I think this film is actually pretty good. And that's, I think, probably what lends it to having sort of middle of the road reviews it got from people. Yeah. Like, I think if you're just taking this on a drama front, this is going to get quite a low score. But when you take in the practicality, and I'll also add in, there's not a lot of CG at all in this film. There's a lot of practical stunts being done here. A lot of, you mentioned the explosions, but there's a lot of like fight choreography. There's a lot of like close quarters gun action happening here. Like, it feels like there's craft put into this film.
Well, when you have it directed by a former stuntman, it's a little bit like the John Wick guys
Mm-hmm.
or the director of the Extraction films with Chris Hemsworth. It's like they know that world and they know how to make this look good, and they have been made to look bad many times over their career, where they would, put together stunt sequences that looked, awesome,
Mm-hmm.
and then have it chopped up by an editor or, badly shot or, conveyed in a way where they're probably go, well, our work was not shown in its best form. And clearly this is someone who cares about showcasing that as good as it can be. And it comes across. Like, I was really impressed with the big shootout at the end between Gerard Butler's character and Ali Fazal's character, where they're just running at each other shooting.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I've seen this moment a billion times in movies, but I've never really seen it this way. It felt messier. It felt more desperate. And it also didn't end in a big, climactic, glorious death scene. It was like he just had to stop the guy and keep on moving. And I really liked that moment.
Well, you compare that to like the scene where Wesley Snipes, is it Michael Bain, I think, in Art of War,
Oh,
are shooting at each other down a corridor, and it just is like the most flattest thing you've ever seen.
yeah, totally.
I mean, that was just rough. I mean, there was no slow mo like Trinity and Neo on the rooftop, but and Agent Smith, I think it was. But yeah, I think that's a look. It's a beautiful looking film.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're happy to put 2 hours in the tank and watch a film that looks nice, there's something here for you. The only thing I want to throw out in likes that I haven't already mentioned, and I suppose I kind of have, but is I just want to tip my hat to Gerard Butler and to Navid, Negahban, and Ali Fazal, as you just mentioned. I think they're the best performances in the film. I think a lot of the problem here is coming from its script. I think Gerard Butler gets the assignment.
Yeah.
And he's playing what he's been told to play and directed into playing. There's a moment where he sat on the rooftop after just talking to, I'm guessing, his ex-wife. And he just looks like he's just so beaten down by this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he sells that. Like he sells the fact that he is just this like gun for hire that has been burning it at both ends and is just empty inside. And I totally buy that. And again, to two other people I just mentioned, they both play their characters really well. And I think like had the script been better,
Mm-hmm.
had the characterizations of the other people around them been more interesting, I think this would have left more of a lasting impression on those that did see Kandahar.
I felt like the movie should have spent more time with the Mo character.
Yeah, I agree.
Because we're introduced with him going through customs in a fairly tense sequence.
Okay.
And I'm like, just give me more about this character. Because we're supposed to... He's the one we're supposed to connect to in some ways the most. Because of just how desperate his journey is. Like,
and he's not trained in like fighting and stuff like that. He's just a normal Joe.
Yeah, and the movie really does kind of pay tribute to translators who have to help these agents in the field.
As it should.
And, Gerard Butler talks about kind of one of the traumas he has is there was a translator he had. They went on 6 missions together, and then he was killed. Mm-hmm. And so, like, that's something I think is really interesting in the movie. But, like, give me that character's story. Gerard Butler... We know him as this kind of man of action, and they give him little human moments, but they feel a little bit cliched, the kind of stuff that's really boilerplate. And this character, at least in terms of American films, is something new.
Yeah.
It's a translator in the field. Tell us that character's story, because I just think it's so much more interesting, and there's so much nuance and depth that could have been mined from it.
Well, there's a moment where he goes to the grave of his son that he lost in the region, and like just the actor just basically breaks down and just talks to the grave for a second, and it's just like this is actual drama in this film, and it's actually very well done from the actor, but also just very welcome from me, like seeing a bit of action, a bit of drama injected into this film. I wish there'd been more of it. I wish there'd been more characterizations. I wish there'd been more from other people in this film. I think he does a good job, but I think it's the rest of the film that just makes this very unmemorable.
Yeah, I mean, I liked how the Kahil character, played by Ali Fazal, like, was someone who had some Western ideals.
Yeah.
And was...
You love those Western ideals.
I love those Western ideals. Yeah. But the fact that he was, like, kind of working in that world as an intelligence agent, but also, like, could see the flaws in it.
Well, he was weary of it all. Like he could see. It's like one of those spies that's been in the game too long. That just sees it all as just this weird game that he's playing now, and is not surprised by anything particularly.
I like the scene with him and the kid.
Yeah.
Where like the kid is, going to set off a bomb, and he just talks to him about the Quran for a moment, and I'm like, give me more of this. Like, the movie is not working as a straight action movie, so let's dive deeper into the drama of it, because that would make it more interesting. And like, I have to kind of hold on to like a conversation like that, but the movie should have probably dug more in there.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you write an essay in university or something, and the teacher writes something like "go further" or "dive deeper into this" or something like. They're like, you're just scratching the surface.
It's the most frustrating note to get back. I hate that note.
I know, right?
I got it all the time.
There was one other performance I thought was good, which was Travis Fimmel, or at least it stood out to me, which is the CIA handler who has become Muslim himself.
Oh yes,
and like his character isn't prominent enough in the movie, but I'm like, this is someone else who's gone on a very interesting journey. A movie could be made entirely about that character, but they don't necessarily utilize him the best.
Well, he's just one of those people I sort of referred to earlier who just magically turns up and saves the day, and there's no sort of fanfare about it. Like, there's meant to be fanfare, but because you don't really know anything about him or particularly care about him as a person, you're just like, oh, he's here, is he?
Yeah.
And he's brought some friends in a tank. Cool.
Yeah. It's a lot of good ideas that aren't fleshed out.
Just like us starting this podcast, Cam. I got one more to add before we move on to the next section, Cam.
Yeah.
And that is, I want everyone to put this film on and tune into the 1 hour, 37 mark and 20 seconds.
Okay.
Because you get one of the greatest moments of extras acting I've ever seen in my life. There's a lady, this is in the compound where they're watching on the big digital screens. There is a lady at a desk in the background who is actually falling asleep.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I mean, she is having I think she's having a rough shoot, and she just wants to get out. She's got a hard out time, and she just doesn't want to be here. And she kind of looks around, just looks a bit glum, and her eyes just kind of go a little bit sleepy. And it's like, oh boy, she's not having fun. I can't imagine we are.
Oh, that may be up there with the guy with the sweeping awkwardly in Quantum of Solace.
Hey, there's a connection there. Much like Quantum of Solace, this film misses the mark.
The sweeper and the sleeper.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Red alert, Spyhards, we are shaking things up over on the Patreon page.
That's right, we are launching an exclusive new show where we tackle the exploits of the small screen's greatest secret agents, like Jack Bauer, George Smiley, and beyond.
And don't forget, every month you also get 2 Agents in the Field episodes where we decode the adventures of your favorite spy actors in their biggest non-spy movies. But Cam, tell the people what we have coming up next.
Scott, Brian Mills has some exceptional skills. Starring in a hit TV show is not one of them. We are going to talk this week about the 2017 pilot for the Taken TV series. Will we be taken with what this show has to offer? Find out.
So don't get left out in the cold. Help support your favorite spy movie podcast and join the circus at patreon.com/spyhards. But before this message self-destructs, let's get back to the spy jinx. Okay, Cam, I mean, we spent 20 minutes talking about our dislikes at the start, so there can't be much more to add, but dislikes, what do you have?
I don't want to hammer on the things we've already talked about.
No.
The fact that it doesn't have a lot of depth with characters, or it's a little messy in terms of setting up the conflict. So I'm going to focus on something that's kind of just representative of these things. The reporter character that is set up, played by Nina Toussaint-White, is someone that has been printing information from a source, and that is what sort of starts off the trail of Gerard Butler's character.
Well, she releases a knock list, basically.
She does, yeah. This feels like something that should matter in the movie. And it's so weird to me to set up this character. You have the Iran security, interrogating her, threatening basically her daughter, or holding up photos of her daughter. Everyone has daughters in this movie. Did you notice that?
Well, we all have them, don't we?
Well, it seems like it. It's funny. It reminded me of the villain in the last Lara Croft movie, who his entire motivation was going, I just got to get home to my daughters. I just got to get home to my daughters. He just kept saying it over. Yeah.
Is he from New York?
I don't remember what his accent was.
Or Boston? My daughters.
It was like really funny. Like I remember I've joked about that for years. Was that character's motivation was saying, I got to get back to my daughters. But it felt like that was the case for so many characters in this, including Gerard Butler. But that was the case with this character as well. And it's like, why would you set this up and do nothing with it?
Yeah, she just sort of disappears from the film, doesn't she, until the end where she's released. But there's no like the rumors closing in on her. There's no like ticking clock to her being hurt or anything like that. She's just a plot device.
We have no idea what happened to this woman in this entire film.
No.
And it's so weird because it's like a lot of these characters have daughters. This is the only real female character in the movie.
Yeah.
And she's just used as a plot device.
Well, let me ask you a further question. Who gave her the information?
We don't know.
Great.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Surely that would be like an interesting, like, maybe the guy that Gerard Butler was living with, the other spy, was the guy leaking the information. Wouldn't that have been interesting?
Could have been interesting. Yeah, and I get it. They want to keep the focus on Gerard Butler's race to freedom with, Mo, that character.
We're back to driving films again, aren't we?
We are, but it's like you are spending so much time setting up all these various players in very one-dimensional ways.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some time should have been spent on someone like the reporter and like what she's going through and why that scares us about Gerard Butler getting caught.
Well, like, or maybe kill her.
It doesn't have to be
Like,
that, but like...
it doesn't have to be that, but I'm saying there could be consequences in a sense. Like,
sure.
If they do get caught, it's not going to be we're going to torture you for a few days and then release you. It's you're not going to be here much longer. Or you torture her actually quite intensely.
I get it would be very grim, and I'm not sure they want to go down that road with her character. And so I can understand the filmmakers being like, look, that's not something we want to put on film.
Get that.
Fine.
Get that.
100% get it.
Yep.
But it also feels weird to set up this character and just do so little with her, and then just have a shot of her at the end being released and being like, well, that's done.
I forgot who she was.
Well, that's why I was so confused through the movie, because we had Mo kept talking about how his wife's sister had gone missing. And I'm like, well, is that the wife's sister? Is that the connection? And if that is the case, okay. But I have no idea.
No, nor do I. I found it to be a frustrating choice. There's a lot of them in this film, and I did use that word earlier.
Yeah. Even if you had like, I don't know, well, as you said, like someone associated with the Gerard Butler character talking to a reporter.
Well, make it more interconnected. Like, give us, like, okay, so she gets captured, and then you see her getting tortured-ish, well, shouted at, really, for about a minute, and then she's released into the film. Where are the stakes in that? Why are they not capturing more people? Why are the wolves not coming in?
Well, you also have Gerard Butler's helper at the start of the film, who's killed. Maybe that could have been the source. I don't know.
Wasn't that the guy I was talking about?
Well, there's the handler, the CIA handler, and then there's the assistant that's killed.
I meant the assistant.
Oh, you meant the assistant. Okay, yeah. Either one. You know what? It could be the handler as well. I don't care.
Sure.
Although it would be very strange for him to be doing that and compromising his agent, but nonetheless.
Well, all the agents are compromised. The knock list has been revealed. Like, everyone who is a spy in the Middle East has been outed. So what does it matter anymore? It doesn't matter if you're a handler or a spy. It's just get guns in your hands and get blasting, I guess.
Yeah.
I feel like there could have been more chaos in this film, more tension, more stakes. Despite the fact that there is a ticking clock and it is set up, but I just don't feel like at any point they weren't ever going to get out.
Well, did this movie feel propulsive to you?
No. Well, I could talk about that as my dislike. This is 2 hours, and I said it did not need to be 2 hours. This could have been a clean 90-minute film. There's a lot of loving sequences of, I guess, somewhere in Saudi Arabia in a drone shot. Just don't get me wrong, it adds to the sense of scale and makes it feel like a bigger film. But if you haven't got the fundamentals down of storytelling and character, then I don't know if you need to be spending that sort of time on that. So make it quicker, make it punchy at least. And I mean that both in physical punches and also, pace.
Because if you have a movie where characters desperately need to get to a certain point, and the entire movie's about putting obstacles in their way, you want to feel like you are moving through things, and it's like fast-paced and it's intense. And I just never felt that. It kept like having these lulls. And it's like I could appreciate when they introduced like that warlord character who Gerard Butler is using basically as a contact.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the individual that killed Moe's son, which I thought was very coincidental that this was the guy that had done it.
The random person they stumbled upon, yeah.
That was very random. Not the best screenwriting there. But the fact they want to have a moment like that with a character, I think helps flesh out the world here that they're trying to examine.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's those constant interruptions that are preventing the movie from feeling propulsive. And you have this asset that's on their tail, a la Jason Bourne.
Yep.
And you look at the Bourne movies, no one's going to say those movies don't have any intelligence to them. Like, they have a certain worldview. They're trying to convey information about, the time in which they are made.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Greengrass is quite political. But those movies move. And there are supporting characters. You spend time with Joan Allen.
Mm-hmm.
You spend time with Julia Stiles. You get to know about those characters. Brian Cox. You know what's going on with each player in an interesting way without ever forsaking pace. And this movie did not learn any lessons from that movie.
No, I think that's partly down to having just too many cooks in terms of characters. There are just too many different sets of baddies and goodies and people we don't know or don't spend much time with. You mentioned Ali Fazal, who I think should have had far more screen time. Like, he should have been the Carl Urban character in Supremacy. Right? He's constantly chasing Bourne down, and they're actually not fighting each other for very long, but you are with him and you feel like he is on Jason Bourne's back, and he's the one who takes out his girlfriend at the start. Like, he is an equal to Jason Bourne. I don't feel like Ali Fazal is an equal to Gerard Butler.
It's a lot of shots of him riding motorcycles through the desert.
He runs out of gas and just waits to be picked up.
Yeah.
How energetic.
Yeah.
How propulsive.
Yeah. And it just feels like clashing sensibilities of, on one hand, it wants to service the Gerard Butler action market.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other, it wants to say more.
Yeah.
It wants to have a point of view. They keep mentioning Sicario. It's like they have loftier ideals, but these two things are butting up against each other. Because when you watch a lot of Gerard Butler action films, they have pretty superficial characters.
Yep.
They are about the action over character, and that's what this movie is too.
Yep. I can't disagree with you. And in terms of any other dislikes I want to throw in, I mean, we mentioned the too many baddies, the lack of depth. I just want to say, I mean, we said that the filmmaking is pretty good in here. There are a couple of moments that are either doing like night for day, or day for night, I should say, or they're just shot at like low light times. And I know you want to portray the fact that they're basically traveling in darkness. And maybe it was how my screen was calibrated, but there were a few scenes in this film where I could barely see anything.
Yeah, I was in the same boat. Yeah, and I think it was intentionally disorienting because it wants you to feel like the characters like not necessarily knowing where danger is striking from, but yeah, not necessarily Here's my question to you. What time of day did you watch it?
Lunchtime?
I made the same kind of thing, or I kind of watched it while the light was out. It's summer here, right? So and I think that kind of like reflection in the room did not help. Whereas I'd be curious if I were to watch it late at night where it's a lot darker.
I mean, yeah, it's a small gripe, but I don't think my time of day choice to watch a film should impact it enough that I actually feel obliged to mention it in the review.
Yeah, I agree with you there, and I wasn't going to mention it, but I had a similar reaction too.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, also more for me for like putting the TV on the floor and standing above it whilst watching.
Does not help. No.
I really need to see a chiropractor about my neck.
I mean, the skylight was coming right down on the TV.
Yeah. No, you're not wrong. Lastly, final notes. I've got a couple left to wrap us up. What about you, Cam?
I didn't have a lot of side notes on this one. One thing I did note though was we have Gerard Butler buying a graduation card for his daughter. That was the cheapest dollar store card I think I've ever seen.
I mean, I recently celebrated my birthday, and I'll note that your card never turned up, so you're even cheaper than Gerard Butler.
You got me there.
Still waiting for that card.
Keep waiting.
I will keep waiting. And one of my notes actually jumps off of yours because it happens in the same scene. He's at the airport store, I guess is what that is, like a duty-free store.
Yeah.
Right? And he's looking at different items, and it just made me kind of laugh that he goes to pick up a pyramid bar, which of course is meant to be a Toblerone, but they wouldn't pay for Toblerone, but they used the exact same packaging and called it a pyramid bar. And I just thought, like, if you're going to use the exact same font and packaging as Toblerone, just call it Toblerone. I'm sure they'll be fine with it.
That was really funny. I'm glad you brought that up because I did note that mentally while I was watching the movie, but didn't write it down. The other thing that was funny was him going and smelling all the perfumes.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever done that in an airport, and I've been bored in many airports.
I don't think I've ever done that in life in general.
Well, I mean, I've had to share a room with you. I can tell that you don't do that at all.
Don't reveal my shame.
Honestly, you should. You should try it. I just want to add as well a couple of little other notes. We actually get to see what happens when the knock list is released, because we've had a few films now where like lists of agents around the world has been threatened to be released. I think it happens in Skyfall, Mission Impossible 1, a few other films don't necessarily jump to mind, but there are other ones where like a list of spy agents is threatened to be leaked. Turns out when it happens, not much happens.
Yeah, like the ramifications on a larger scale don't really come across in this movie.
No, I think that's actually probably more of an interesting film.
Yeah.
Although, isn't that like the setup for Spy with Melissa McCarthy? Like all of the other agents around the world get killed, and then she's like the last one standing?
Something along those lines, yeah.
I think so. Or something similar happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I just found that to be interesting. And my last note is it's nice to see that in the year 2023, phone phreaking is still a thing, because this film opens with Gerard Butler and his assistant, as you call it there, Cam, hacking into the phone networks of, I believe it's Iran's underground nuclear power plant that they blow up.
Yeah.
And they're doing a bit of phone phreaking by tapping the phone wires. And of course, we watched Sneakers recently, which features quite a lot of that. And I just thought it was nice to tie that together.
Yeah, we saw another movie too where they did a whole bunch of that as well.
3 Days of the Condor.
That's what it was. Yeah, where we were like geeking out over the telephone science of that movie. Yeah, that was fun to see. And again, that's the process stuff that I enjoyed in this movie, which was like they made you feel like you were in on the espionage, like you understood what they were doing and they were conveying it visually in an interesting way. I just wish the movie did more of that, because like it's nice to see a kind of serious-minded CIA, in the Middle East spy film.
High drama. That first scene's pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
Like, you've got them being questioned by the guards, like, are you a spy, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
There's a bit of tension in that first scene.
Because I would like more movies like this, because, I mean, Scott, how many World War II spy films have we covered and are we going to cover?
I've lost count by this point, honestly. Like, I feel like every second film we're back to World War II and the usual suspects are the baddies once again.
Yeah, and I mean, we have also done a couple Civil War ones, and we like those because it's like, oh, wow, this is a little outside the norm. And so I know that Hollywood...
You learn things in those films.
Right, yeah. Whereas, like, I think Middle Eastern spy films, U.S. markets are more scared of making those movies.
Sure.
So there's just fewer of them, just because the box office for them has been pretty spotty. I think A Body of Lies, which also didn't do particularly well at the box office. And when you do big budget movies like that and they don't perform, that means they don't want to make more movies like them. So I'd like to see more of that, because a movie like this, while I didn't really, I can't recommend it too strongly, I appreciate that it feels different in terms of a lot of spy movies we cover.
No, I think that's something I said in my opening statement, is I appreciate that there is a story here and there is something interesting to tell. Just don't think the film does a good job of telling it.
Yeah, and characters with different worldviews that we don't get in some of the other standard spy stuff.
And I think I need to bring back a question that we haven't asked in a while.
Okay.
And that is the tenetometer. Cam, this is the question. And for those who haven't heard of the tenetometer before, we basically like to look and grade films on how overly complex they are, because Tenet is frankly the most overly complex film I think that has ever existed, so much so that I'm probably still trying to decipher it from both ends.
And so the tenetometer is a 1 to 10 scale where we basically have to rank how complicated the plot was. This movie, the fact we're bringing up this meter means that it is worthy of mentioning, because there's some movies
Yeah.
when we talk about like
Spy Kids 5.
Spy Kids 5, or I was going to say the Penguins movie we did, Penguins of Madagascar. We don't need
Penguins.
the meter. We can just, skate by that week. But
Sure.
this movie, it's not a 10. I might put it maybe at like a 5.
I actually wrote down 6.
6. So it's kind of that mid-range of like, it's confusing to the point where you go, this is confusing. But I do think, and I didn't mention this earlier, I think by the time you get to the end of the film, it's pretty sorted out.
It's pretty sorted out, but like I did have to open Wikipedia a couple of times to read back over the section that I've just watched to be like, oh, so this was who, that was who. The fact that I'm thinking of even looking at Wikipedia, I think, prompts me to ask the Tenetometer question.
Yeah, I did the same thing, actually.
And if you want to hear us do more jingles and you feel like writing one yourself, do let us know, because we are open to jingles.
Okay.
Cam is less open to jingles.
Cam doesn't want to volume balance them for the podcast, but if people want to do them, I'll consider them.
We need like a knock list jingle. I was looking at songs the other day that have the word knock in it, see if I could play with that. But like I couldn't make one work. But then again, I'm not very imaginative.
Okay.
Cam has no interest in jingles. He's like, okay.
So that knock list.
Yeah, what about that knock list? Well, okay, that is the mission. That is what we're here for. Is Kandahar making the knock list? We've spoken about it for a while. Let's decide. Cam, you're up first.
Yeah, no. This is the type of kind of 2.5-star movie that has enough where you go, oh, this may be actually something that I like. Oh, wait, I feel held back now. It's one that's in some ways the most frustrating type of movie to review, because when they're really bad, you can just go to town and have a ton of fun.
Yeah.
Pointing out all the mistakes and how it all just goes horribly awry. If they're great, you get to celebrate them. But a movie like this, you're kind of pushed and pulled in two different directions, and you're kind of sitting in the middle going, oh, I kind of like it right in the middle.
So I've heard, but that's a no from you, Cam. And I won't belabor the point. I started off by saying this film is frustrating, and I don't think there's many films that would make the knock list if I opened up with the word frustrating. It's a no from me. I think it had a lot of promise, and it didn't reach its potential.
Yeah, totally.
There you go, 2 no's, and as such, the dossier on the film is complete and filed as classified. That was Kandahar, folks. Cam has nothing to say about Kandahar.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
There you go. But, another one in the bag. And we've been going through a string of sort of more recent films recently, because Cam and I noticed that we hadn't really been like touching the films that had come out in 2022, 23, 24. So we've gone through quite a few of them recently to sort of get rid of that backlog a little bit. But moving on from Kandahar, Cam, what do we have next week?
Scott, I think the Tenetometer may take a week off, because we are going to go back to 1966 and look at the third Man from U.N.C.L.E. film, One Spy Too Many.
Well, I cannot wait to open Channel D once again and hang out with Napoleon Solo and Ilya Kuryakin once again. I do love me some Men from U.N.C.L.E., and your mission, folks, should you choose to accept it, is to join us next week as we take a look at 1966's One Spy Too Many. Will it need a Tenetometer count? There's only one way to find out. And make sure, of course, if you'd like to pop on over to our Patreon page and show us some love at patreon.com/Spyhards. There'll be a link in the show notes below. Over 100 bonus episodes available for you now. And you can keep the lights on at Spyhards HQ.
Definitely.
Cam is coming in with the insight. And make sure you follow us discreetly, as always, on social media at Spyhards. That's SPYHARDS on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But until next week, you'll find Cam and I milling around at the duty-free looking for a pyramid bar.